Catherine makes history, debuts stunning royal accessory at first Windsor Gala. The air around Windsor Castle shimmered with the kind of magic only centuries of tradition can create. Velvet banners rippled in the late summer breeze, and the cobbled courtyard echoed with the sound of horse-drawn carriages arriving in rhythmic procession. But tonight, it wasn't just the majesty of the castle that had the world watching. It was Catherine, Princess of Wales, stepping into history with a single, extraordinary accessory. For months, the royal press had been abuzz with speculation. Whispers of a mysterious, never-before-seen piece from the royal collection had electrified fashion commentators and historians alike. Some insisted it was a jewel hidden away since the reign of Queen Alexandra. Others claimed it was an entirely new commission, something meant to cement Catherine's growing role as a modern queen-in-waiting. But no one knew for certain. Until tonight. It was Catherine's first major Windsor Gala since assuming her elevated duties after the king's recent health concerns. The event, a glittering charity banquet for the preservation of historic British landmarks, was set in St. George's Hall, lit by crystal chandeliers that seemed to drip liquid gold over the long banquet tables. Every detail had been choreographed to perfection, but the moment everyone was waiting for was her arrival. Royal watchers lined the edges of the courtyard, smartphones poised, even as they tried to remain respectfully quiet. Inside, the invited guests, diplomats, aristocrats, and a scattering of celebrities leaned toward one another, whispering in anticipation. And then, the soft rumble of carriage wheels silenced them. Catherine stepped down, the moonlight catching the deep midnight blue silk of her gown, tailored to perfection by a London couturier. But it wasn't the gown that drew the gasps. It was what rested upon her head, a breathtaking circlet unlike anything anyone had seen before. The accessory was not quite a crown, nor entirely a tiara. It was something between the two, crafted from platinum and set with the most unusual gems, 5 large star-shaped diamonds, each surrounded by smaller sapphires that glimmered like the evening sky. It had an almost ethereal quality, as though it had been plucked from a constellation and set upon her head. Later, palace sources would confirm that the piece was called the Windsor Star, commissioned in 1912 for a royal wedding that never took place. The intended bride, Princess Amelia of Connaught, died tragically before her wedding day, and the jewel was locked away in the royal vault, untouched for over a century. It was meant to symbolize both love and destiny, a royal historian explained to the BBC during the broadcast. For Catherine to wear it tonight is not just about beauty, it's about reclaiming a lost piece of royal history. Those in the know couldn't help but read deeper meaning into Catherine's choice. For decades, royal women had adhered to strict traditions when it came to formal adornment. Tiaras were for state banquets, crowns for coronations. But Catherine's Windsor Star defied both categories. It was ceremonial, without being ostentatious, regal yet modern. And in the age of global media scrutiny, every royal choice is a message. This one was clear. Catherine was stepping into a role that wasn't about simply repeating the past, it was about redefining it. Inside St. George's Hall, the buzz of conversation surged the moment she entered. Heads turned, cameras discreetly clicked, and even seasoned diplomats found themselves momentarily at a loss for words. She carries herself like she's already queen, one foreign ambassador murmured to his wife, who nodded without taking her eyes off the princess. The banquet began with the clinking of crystal glasses, followed by a 5-course feast showcasing the finest of British cuisine, from Scottish smoked salmon to venison from the royal estates. Catherine moved from table to table with the practiced grace of someone who understood that every smile, every handshake, every carefully chosen word was part of her royal duty. At one point, she stopped beside an elderly war veteran seated near the dais. The man, wearing a chest full of medals, looked up at her with awe. "Your Royal Highness," he said softly, "I never thought I'd see the Windsor Star again. My grandmother used to tell me stories about it." Catherine smiled, resting a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Then it's my honor to bring it back into the light, for her, and for all who remember." The exchange was small, but it spread quickly through the room. carried by murmurs and the subtle hum of admiration. When it was her turn to address the gathering, Catherine stood at the gilded lectern, her voice carrying effortlessly through the great hall. "Tonight," she began, "we are not just celebrating the preservation of buildings and landmarks. We are honoring the stories they hold, the lives lived within their walls, the joys and sorrows they have witnessed, the history they carry forward to us. In that same spirit, I wear tonight a piece of our shared heritage, a jewel made for a wedding that fate did not allow, but whose beauty, like history itself, endures." Her words were measured but warm, each sentence building a quiet momentum that seemed to draw everyone closer. By the time she concluded, speaking of unity, legacy, and the responsibility of the present to honor the past, there was a standing ovation. Of course, the world outside the banquet hall was just as captivated. On social media, hashtags like #WindsorStar and #CatherineAtWindsor began trending within minutes. Fashion editors scrambled to identify her gown designer. Historians debated the exact origins of the accessory. Royalists dissected every detail of her look, the way her hair had been styled in soft waves to frame the Windsor star, the delicate diamond drop earrings chosen to echo its celestial motif. But perhaps the most intriguing detail came from a palace aide, speaking off the record to a Times journalist. "The princess didn't just choose it because it was beautiful," the aide revealed. "She discovered the Windsor star herself while reviewing the Royal Vault's archives for a different engagement. She learned the story, and she felt it deserved to be seen again, especially at an event about preserving our heritage. It wasn't just a fashion choice. It was a personal mission." By the time the last carriage rolled away from Windsor Castle and the chandeliers dimmed, the moment had already been immortalized. Newspapers the next morning would devote entire front pages to the image of Catherine in the Windsor star, her serene expression and poised stance captured for history. Royal biographers would later look back on this night as a turning point, one where Catherine moved from being a beloved Princess of Wales to being seen as the inevitable, prepared, and deeply thoughtful future queen. In the weeks that followed, replicas of the Windsor star appeared in shop windows from London to New York, and jewelers reported a surge in demand for star-themed designs. The Royal Collection even released an official photograph of the original, along with a short film narrating its history, an unprecedented move that spoke to Catherine's influence. But for those who had been in St. George's Hall that night, the most unforgettable part wasn't the jewel itself. It was the way Catherine wore it, not as an ornament, but as a story, a bridge between past and present, loss and renewal. As she prepared to retire to her private apartments that night, Catherine paused by a window overlooking the courtyard. The moon hung low over Windsor, bathing the ancient stones in silver light. She reached up, gently touching the Windsor star, feeling its cool weight against her hair. Somewhere in the darkened halls of the castle, portraits of queens long gone looked down from their gilded frames. She imagined they were watching her, not with judgment, but with a kind of quiet approval. It was not the coronation yet, but it was a promise, and Catherine intended to keep it.